I think it is really critical that at this stage we all understand what is on the line today as the college football playoff, really the managers and the leadership of the college football playoff get together today virtually, tomorrow the managers. So today is the presidents who will meet virtually. Tomorrow is the athletic directors and commissioners who make policy essentially. They will get together tomorrow in Dallas, and these are gravitational meetings. We have got all of that covered for you as well. But I think the biggest story in college football this morning, I'm not even sure that it's close, Jake. I think it is the ACC versus Florida State, and this is coming to a head very quickly. Now, you may have heard on Friday that the ACC went back to court and asked for a pause to be pushed on the ACC versus Florida State lawsuit. The details of that are quite important. What the ACC asked a judge to do was to push pause on the lawsuit in Florida until the case in North Carolina can be heard. Now, of course, why is this significant? Because Florida State is based in Tallahassee, which is where their lawsuit has been filed, which is where they want it to be heard, because it will be heard in all likelihood in front of a judge that is a graduate of Florida State. That is clearly a home field advantage for the Seminoles, while the ACC wants this heard in Charlotte on its home turf. But I think the devil is in the details. In that filing by the ACC the other day, they offered, I don't know, what would you call it, a peace offering? They essentially said that they were open to settlement. And I don't know, Jake, I feel like that really is the only way that this works out well for anybody.
Yeah, I think that, the ACC understands that it's in sort of a unique position here where, obviously it has all the control in terms of what the paperwork says. Paperwork says you signed an agreement twice. You assigned your rights away to this conference till 2036, right? That's the agreement you signed if you're Florida State. There's no getting around that, which, if you remember, is why we're here in the first place, right? We all remember that Florida State, has been trying to get out of this grant of rights for several years now. So what the ACC is doing here is they're simply saying, hey, instead of us battling this member institution for, years on end, maybe it is smarter for us as a conference to find a way to turn this into two things. Number one, a revenue generating opportunity, right? Meaning, hey, Florida State is going to pay us some sum of money to get out of this conference and get out of this grant of rights. Now, obviously, that hasn't been agreed to yet. There's a lot of speculation as to what that might be. Most people think, and I'm in agreement on the idea, that it's probably going to be you have to pay out the media distributions that you would have got over the course of this grant of rights to get out of it. Because the ACC is not going to sit here and be like, yeah, you can leave our conference, but we're just going to lose all that money we were supposed to get because of this agreement you signed. That obviously doesn't work for the ACC. So that's the first thing. But I think the bigger picture concept here for the ACC is that this is sort of a, hey, let's get our power back a little bit. When you added SMU and you expanded your conference, that was a pretty bad look. And when the College Football Playoff Committee decided to say, yeah, we're not going to sit here and count SMU as a Power 4 member.
Totally
That's a bad look for your conference, dude. So what the ACC is doing here is saying, hey, let's strong arm Florida State. Let's take control of this situation, and let's put their feet to the fire. And I agree with that.
I think that this is the only way it gets done. And I think, this is probably what everybody knew was coming. And I think we've talked about this for months and months. And that original filing that Florida State had in court, where they talked about the fact it was, $572 million was the probable number. College football sources close to the situation have told us that this settlement could land somewhere around $300 million, which is damn near a 50% savings if you're Florida State. And if you're able to get that number from 572 to 300, I think it's a no-brainer. But I also think that there's a very big question about Florida State's financial ability to pay $300 million to get out. I think we've also heard that Florida State was out looking for financing. I think that the ACC has always looked at Florida State's exit from the conference as a windfall financially. And I think it's the entirety of why they added Stanford and Cal. And I think that they added Stanford and Cal because I think they recognize that Florida State and probably North Carolina were going to be on the move. Now, obviously there's a lot to talk about in terms of where does Florida State end up, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. But if our sources are correct, and it's $300 million that it will take for Florida State to exit the conference, I think this is a huge moment in time.
And I think Florida State seems to think that, a proper penalty for them would be the unrealized revenue on their side from leaving the conference, which is a total misunderstanding of what a grant of rights is, right? A grant of rights is you saying, hey, we're granting the conference our TV rights, and they can go and do a deal with ESPN or, whatever media partner. So when you want to leave, saying that unrealized revenue should be your penalty and that you shouldn't really have to pay anything is in my opinion a bad look in terms of Florida State's future, whether that is the SEC or the Big Ten or whatever conference they wind up joining. Because if you're going to sit here and you're going to operate like, yeah, we shouldn't have to pay a penalty, we're the ones losing all the money, even though the conference is the one losing all the money, that's a bad look in terms of your new home. On top of the fact you've behaved in such an aggressive manner, that's what I'm saying. Like, I don't know that it's just a home run that the Florida State Seminoles are just going to, drive their U-Haul into the Big Ten, dude. I don't think that that's just a rubber stamp book it, because I don't know that they're a real cooperative member.
Well, I also think one of the things that a lot of college football playoff managers are worried about is the precedent that this sets. And $300 million is a kick in the balls any way you look at it, right? That's not a small amount of money, but I also think what this is it is also a shot over the bow at this Big Ten SEC conversation. And I think that's inevitably where this is going. And I when we look at the future of college football, I don't think it was ever a situation, as we have told you, and I have been told by multiple college football sources, I've never once heard, hey, this is the SEC and the Big Ten wanting to dissolve the NCAA or move on and be their own entity. What the Big Ten and the SEC did was show the fortitude to take a step away from the norm. And I think that's what this ultimately ends up being, because if Florida State pays $300 million to get out, and now all of a sudden everybody knows what the price tag is to get out of the ACC, what do you think is going to happen? I think you are going to see that war chests are going to begin to empty, and there is going to be the ability for schools to buy their way out of conferences with this precedent that is being set by Florida State. And it is very, very dangerous, because I think Jake's point about Florida State having zero leverage here, Florida State's got no leverage at all in a court of law. And I think they know that. But has the ACC weakened to the point where they're just tired of fighting the fight? And I think the answer is yes. I think the ACC very clearly recognized it was weakened, and they very clearly took what many people think was a wrong decisive action, but arguably they took decisive action by adding Stanford and Cal and SMU. Now, I don't know where this ultimately leads. My opinion, based on people I've spoken to, is Florida State likely pays a minimum of $300 million, and they end up trying to get membership in the SEC. But that is also the critical question here for Florida State, because Florida State is not a popular member of the NCAA. And I would again remind you, what is the NCAA? It's not some arbitrary board of people who just happen to have oversight over universities. The NCAA is made up of all of these universities.
Facts.
Everybody has to be a member to be in a conference, to be in the NCAA. You have to be a member. And Florida State is not very popular as a member right now. And you look at what Florida State is doing, and you look at the call-outs and the brazenness in which they have spoken publicly and in court filings. You're not doing yourself any favor by burning bridges. I think that is one thing that Florida State has to be very careful of, because the Big Ten has been very hesitant to even acknowledge the fact that Florida State is going to be a free agent. Now, you want to talk to the Big Ten about North Carolina and Virginia and a bunch of other institutions in the ACC? Sure, let's have that conversation. But I think Florida State in a lot of corners of the college athletic world is taboo. And I think that may include the SEC. I think Florida State is going to have to offer significant concessions to the next conference that they join. And I think it's justifiably so, because I don't see a way that you can walk back the things that Florida State has said and done.
Yeah, I think it's just the same way you can't walk back the way, the Michigan court situation was handled, or any of these other situations. Just the same way, as an example, George Kliavkoff can't walk back the fact that he burned down his conference and now he's out of a job. Florida State can't sit here and say, yeah, man, we're just a full top tier, class organization. We're just a great member. And it doesn't work that way, man. And that's why I say, like, if you look at the way Florida State is both behaving, but also what they're saying in their court filings versus what the ACC is saying, it's very clear the stances here. Florida State is trying to bend rules or say that somehow because they signed an agreement twice that now they don't have to follow the fact that that agreement doesn't stipulate what the price is to leave the conference. The agreement only stipulates the fact that you have assigned your rights till 2036. So don't tell me that it should be, we're not going to realize that revenue if we leave the conference, so that should be the penalty, when the rest of the members in your conference sign that very same document and are not behaving the way you're behaving.
Yeah, I think it is a very interesting time. And I think this idea that somehow, I look at the Big 12 and I say to myself, I don't know that you can be in a better position than the Big 12, because you look at where the Pac-12 is, obviously, as you talked about, the Pac-12's dead, right? I mean, this meeting tomorrow, they're essentially going to approve a 5-7 tomorrow, and Kirk Schultz is going to be the one that votes as the, as a guy. But I would also point out, it actually won't be Kirk Schultz. It'll be the commissioner of the Pac-12 that will be representing the league, who is going to vote to approve a 5-7, because the Pac-2, 12, whatever they are calling themselves versus what they are, needs more at-large bids.
But again, if you're the Mountain West, if you're Mountain West members right now, and you're looking at the Florida State situation, are you not applying that situation to a potential merger with these two schools and trying to understand, okay, if we were to merge and try to reimagine the Pac-12, right? The Mountain 12 brand, as I like to call it. If we were to do that, and we want it out in 5 years, what does that look like? What do we need to make sure is in this new agreement so that if we want to get out, because again, I feel like this is what's going on in college football. Like your point about the Big 12, I feel like whether you're Brett Yormark or you're any member in that conference, you're sitting here and you're in the catbird seat kind of scanning the landscape, and you're saying, okay, we understand that this top cut of college football or college athletics is coming. Are we that school right now, or are we not that school right now?
Well, and I also think it goes a long way to what we've been talking about with realignment. Realignment saved the Pac-12. And I just continue to go back to this. Everything happens in the correct space and time. And if you look at adding Colorado, I think Utah was a must-have now. There's no question. If you look at Colorado, Utah, the Arizona schools, you look at realignment this past fall, it saved the Big 12. Because if they don't make that move, and I think if Brett Yormark doesn't establish this league's business model as two different streams with basketball and football, this conference is absolutely in the exact same spot the ACC is. Because the ACC, it now probably more than ever, if they settle with Florida State, and if we're being honest, Florida State, this is a blue blood brand. This is Bobby Bowden and Deion Sanders. This is Charlie Ward, right? Like this is a blue blood.
But hasn't all the behavior over the last 18 months, let's call it, hasn't that tarnished it a bit? Because is anybody gonna remember this when everything shakes out? It depends how it shakes out, I think. I mean, if you get...
I would agree with that.
So if Florida State goes to, let's say, the SEC, and we get the Florida State rivalry, and, everything's kosher, and everyone loves the new setup, then yeah, we're probably not going to remember the ridiculous argument you're making in court, right? I mean, that's just how we as human beings work. We don't remember all the nonsensical times when the new stuff works out. It's the new car smell, the honeymoon phase. Like that's how life works. But if you were to go to the Big Ten, let's say, and it didn't work out for you there as well, and you were unhappy with your fit there, we're going to come right back to this. So that's why I'm saying for Florida State, and I have to think that they're considering this, but let's say you do get your way. Let's say you do get out of the ACC. Let's say that you do get everything that you want. What is the next thing for you? Like, what is your next, what is your next situation? Your next play? Like, where are you going to, because even if they went to the SEC, they're not going to dominate in the SEC. They are not going to dominate the SEC, or in my opinion, this new Big Ten with the new teams. You're not dominating that league the way you dominated this BS conference known as the ACC.
I think you also have to ask, is there an alternative to the college football playoff? And right now, I don't believe that there is. You have a TV deal in place that CAA negotiated, and ESPN really right now is pushing that ball forward because it's a significant financial commitment for them. And I don't think that there's any doubt that this board of managers meeting that's going to take place today, it had better yield a vote on the extension of the college football playoff TV contract. And I think the only way that happens is if this board of managers meeting and this management committee meeting, and those are two separate things. Remember that. I think a lot of people want to conflate the two, but they are two separate and unique entities, if you will, inside of the college football playoff. This board of managers is the presidents of these universities, and this management committee is the athletic directors and representatives from all these different conferences and universities. And they have to work in lockstep. I don't think there's any doubt that this Florida State situation is significant. But I also think if this contract goes through, it only solidifies what our sources have been telling us. Mm-hmm. And that is that the Big Ten and the SEC are not looking to dissolve the NCAA. The Big Ten and the SEC are not looking to dissolve the college football playoff. They very simply are looking for a better revenue model for the biggest and the baddest in all of college athletics. And frankly, that's a misspeak in all of college football, because I think college basketball and Brett Yormark around the industry is getting a lot of credit for this. Brett Yormark is being recognized as a guy who revolutionized the way that college basketball is leveraged. It is a revenue stream now. It is not just simply the afterthought that at times college basketball had been. And I think what you're seeing now, that's exactly right. It is a dollar figure to most of these universities. And I look again, and everybody that mocks me every time I say that the Big 12 is in a really good position. Did you watch college basketball this weekend? How could you have not? The Big 12 was front and center in some of that Houston game was unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, let me put it this way. If I said, hey, the NFL starting quarterbacks are going to Houston basketball games, you'd say, what the hell are you talking about, dude? You're out of your mind. That never happened, but it did. CJ Stroud was at that game. And I know, obviously, he just completed his rookie season. We see this all the time out of newly minted rookies that, want to get out in the community. I get it. Okay, make your argument that way. But he could have gone to 1,000,001 things, but what did he do? He went to a Houston basketball game because they are good, man.
You mean the pro wrestling match between Iowa State and Houston? Is that what that's what you're referencing?
Yeah, that's what I'm referencing. Yes.
But you look at the biggest, and the best right now, it's in the Big 12. I don't think it's close in college basketball. And you begin to understand that Brett Yormark's vision for an entertainment company dressed and disguised as the Big 12 has absolutely been a saving grace for this conference. Mm-hmm. And I think Greg Sankey realizes that. And I think it's why Tony Petitti is the commissioner of the Big 10, because you have to become an entertainment entity.
Yeah, I think before Brett Yormark showed up in the Big 12, the Big 12's reputation was much more of a, hey, you're a Midwestern brand that, I'm not going to say has smaller brands, but you don't have the behemoths of college football. Obviously, you had Texas and Oklahoma, right? And everyone's like, oh, well, Texas and Oklahoma are just going to run that conference, and then it's everyone else. And then what did we get? Oh, well, Texas and Oklahoma, much like Florida State, right? A little different, but like Florida State's trying to do, negotiated a buyout, got to the SEC, and everyone was like, oh my God, what is the Big 12 going to do? And all Brett Yormark has gone out and done is change the reputation of the conference because he understands the Big 10 and the SEC are not his competition. He does not have the guns to win that fight.
That's exactly
right. But
right.
what he does understand is that if we, to your point, rebrand this thing and we understand that, hey, we have a space, we need to carve out sort of a niche where
if he shows the big boys how to make money,
yes, and then he makes money, we're good.
That's his value.
We're good.
And I've heard it repeatedly that is what has been Brett Yormark's legacy to date in the Big 12. His early tenure here has been, I think, really defined by the fact that you're making money. And I think that is a critical point because, I mean, ultimately, you guys know this. These shows live forever.
Mm-hmm.
Everything that we've ever said is on tape and on this channel. My firm belief, based on people I've spoken to, is the NCAA is not going anywhere. The college football playoff's not going anywhere. And we're going to get a God tier. And I think when you look at the Big 12, I think, and not to say that I'm always right, but I am good looking. The Big 12 is far, far, far stronger and healthier than the ACC.
Mm-hmm.
There is just no question about that anymore. And if the ACC takes this opportunity to negotiate a settlement, and that settlement is, and I've heard it's a minimum of $300 million.
Right.
If it's $300 million, you thought we lost Bedlam? We didn't lose Bedlam. Bedlam's just beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Because, see what
right.
It's Oklahoma
yeah,
State.
Right.
And,
right.
Okay.
Right.
Stay hard.
I can only do.
I'm a man.
Yeah, I can only do what I can do.
Right.
It is going to cause chaos. If you are having blue bloods buy out of their grant of rights, I think you're opening up a Pandora's box. I think you are asking for trouble because it allows the biggest and the best in any conference to say, yeah, I don't want to be here anymore.
But again, I'm just telling you, I think it's situation to situation. If you're like what you said earlier, if you're UNC, yeah, you can buy out of the grant of rights in a hypothetical scenario.
You can.
And then you're going to be coveted by probably the Big Ten, of course. But the point is that when UNC goes into what I call free agency, they are going to have everybody wanting them.
It is free agency.
I am not convinced that Florida State is one of these schools where everyone's like, man, we got to have Florida State. Like,
I agree.
Yes, they have history and tradition, and yes, they're one of those brands. But if you're going to be an a-hole about it with all your member institution friends and you're gonna bash your conference constantly, there are too many other players
people
out
will
there.
die.
Yeah, like people will
Right?
not respect you. People will say, hey, we don't need you. By the way, just want to point this out again, going to continue to die on the hill. When does winning matter with Florida State? Okay, so here's the counter argument. Well, hey, we should have been in the college football playoff. Jordan Travis, we got this great offense. Did you see we won the ACC? Right, but you're stepping up a tier in talent if you go to the Big Ten or the SEC. So you're not winning either of those conferences. I would argue you wouldn't even be top 4 in the SEC. That's my opinion. Maybe I'm wrong.
All right, let's get your thoughts in here. Less of us, more of you. As always, we want to remind you, Prize Picks is a daily fantasy partner of the Monty Show. Last week was one of our biggest weeks on Prize Picks. We really appreciate everybody that downloads the app, signs up, use the promo code Monty, and plays with us. The Genesis Invitational was an absolute bloodbath for me on Prize Picks. I'll be honest with you, man. I miss the NBA.
Yeah, man.
Oh, Monty, bring back the NBA, Monty. Oh, Monty. Dude, the Genesis was a bloodbath. Number one, Tiger absolutely, he treated me like a Perkins waitress when he pulled out of that thing. Okay, that came out wrong.
He withdrew.
Yeah, pull out's the wrong word with Tiger. But I'm just going to move on and say download the Prize Picks app and use the promo code Monty to get 100% deposit matching. The NBA, maybe I should stick to what I know best. Now that football's over, the NBA is usually an ATM machine for me. But with this really, and we're going to talk about the NBA All-Star Weekend. It was horrendous.
Casual ass.
Oh, it was terrible. We'll talk about that. Download the Prize Picks app. Let's get back into the NBA. Use the promo code Monty to get 100% deposit matching up to $100. That means you put in 50, they give you 50 more. You can play for months on $50. Trust me when I say Prize Picks, the only choice for daily fantasy in America. Let's see who's the first one in today. Sean Rollins, good morning. Harry Austin, good morning. Mike Chase, Mikkel, good morning. Joseph Harper, good morning. Dakota Tubbs, Tony Dale, Dakota Tubbs, morning. Tony Dale, throw up to you, baby.
Yeah, go Utah.
No,
my bad.
Canes. Terrible fast food, great football. Marnin, Dakota Tubbs, the Hacks are back. Marnin, Jimmy Otson, my guy. What's up, Jimmy? Good to see you. Like number 10. OG Gary, new lens, new lights. No new lenses.
Nope.
No new lights.
No, just regular lights, dude.
Ken Williams, all hat and cattle. Jimmy Otson, Florida State is getting exactly what they wanted. Ooh, I would agree with that. But this opens up a Pandora's box for anyone else who wants out, especially if ESPN kills the deal in a couple of years. And Jimmy, I think this is a really good point. This contract that ESPN negotiated with the college football playoff via CAA, who represents the college football playoff in TV and media rights negotiations. ESPN wants it signed and done. And ESPN's had this hanging out here since October. This extension has been sitting here. And I think ESPN is a little frustrated that it's taken this long to get this done. And I think if I were ESPN, I'd be a little frustrated as well, because if we're talking about who's got the hammer, nobody's got a bigger hammer than ESPN does. And ESPN feels like they went out of their way to offer a significantly higher renewal at a significantly earlier time and space than they had to. And I think that ESPN wants a deal signed, sealed, and delivered. And that's why this meeting today that we've been telling you about with the board of managers, the presidents in college football, this is significant because they are the ones that will ultimately approve this deal. It will be on the table today. And there was all this controversy over the weekend when everybody was saying, well, it's not true. The deal's not done. Well, the deal is done. The managers haven't discussed it and approved it yet. And they will do that today in their virtual meeting. And I think it is a really important time because, again, if you're the G5, this is what you're hanging on to. If you're the Mountain West and the Pac-2 and if you're all these other G5 conferences, this is what you're hanging on to. Because if you don't get a 5-7 model, I think you are absolutely gut punched if you're a G5. If you don't get this extension, if you don't get this college football playoff extension with ESPN, it's absolutely a gut punch because football, and I know this is breaking news. You guys probably put your hands at 10-2, man. Football is the lifeblood of pretty much every athletic department in this country. And if these deals don't come together, the haves are always going to have it. The nots are never going to have it. And I think if this does not come together, it is the G5 that is going to suffer. And if you want to know truly what a crisis of existence would be for the Pac-2, if this ESPN deal doesn't go through, and if the 5-7 doesn't go through, the Pac-2 might as well just pack their shit and leave because they have no financial road future without not one or the other, without both of these deals being done. The Pac-2's dream of rebuilding their conference comes to an end. And I think it is absolutely critical and crucial that they get this deal done today.
Well, and if the deal doesn't get done today, I think it expedites this relegation model, right?
I would agree with that.
We've been talking about. I mean, if you're not going to do a college football playoff with the 5-7 model, now you're talking about God tier, best of the rest of what was the power conferences, then the G5s. And you got to put together a relegation tier where the G5 can climb the ladder, and it just is what it is.
I think you are going to see God tier and everybody else. And I think, I think we've probably talked about this on this show, but I've heard repeatedly that if there's a God tier, there's a not God tier.
Right.
And you have to have the ability. I think you have to have the ability, and this is just my opinion. You have to have the ability to have an opt-out tier. You have to have the ability to have it be in, and I don't even know how you would describe it. But if you have a God tier where you spend a ton of money, you're going to have the everybody else tier in the middle, but you have to have almost like a Division II where you don't have financial ramifications.
Well, and I think as part of that third tier, that lowest division, the third division, if you will, as part of that, I think you can still run a ton of advertising revenue through these. I mean, again, it's what we see in overseas with soccer, right? You have all these different tournaments, and hey, you were trying to get into Champions League, but you didn't. Now you're going to play, Europa or whatever the case may be. Wherever you find yourself, the reality is you still have a championship game for that tier. And that's what I think for the G5s is super, super important. If you can still sell a G5 on the concept of, hey, you can still win a championship, even if you were to lose out to the upper tier team, that one game where it's like, hey, if you beat the second division team, you're going to climb the ladder. If you lose that game, you can still compete for your championship at the lower division. And I think if you do that, that appeases everybody. And it makes too much sense to me not to do it it's highly unlikely, but if you were not to approve a 5-7 model here.
I agree. Make sure you guys hit the like button. We've had over 500 people watch the show. We only have 27 likes. So if you have not yet, please hit the like button. Son of Skeeter.
Skeeters.
What's up, Skater? Hey, Skater. Your boy's down at the bar, Skater. He's tearing shit up. West Virginia, 9 wins last season. West Virginia. You missed that by 8 wins, I believe. No, Skeeter. Why choose violence? Nobody here said West Virginia was going to win one game.
Yeah. No, I'm not really sure where you heard that, bud.
And I would also relax a bit and say, if you never saw them winning 6 games live, that was always the argument.
Bro, we were talking about Neil Brown needing to be fired.
There is a YouTube account who follows our show called Neil Brown Needs Fired. Everybody, Stephen Smith, a member of the show for 7 months.
Let's go, baby.
Let's go. Appreciate you. What does this mean for the Big 12? Nothing. I think the Big 12, and I continue to hear that the Big 12 is in a really good spot, and I think they are.
I think for the Big 12, all it means is you got to continue to be dominant in basketball.
I would agree.
As long as the Big 12 is dominant in basketball, and they can have 2 teams competing in an expanded college football playoff, you're going to be fine. Because don't forget, right, every team that you get into the college football playoff, and this is what I'm really curious about in an expanded format, is there going to be any type of filter on this? But in the 14 format, if you got into the college football playoff, you were getting media shares out of that. So is it the same thing for a 12 team, or do you have to make it into the final 6 or the final 4, like whatever, right? Like
it's an interesting question.
It's a really interesting question.
Yeah, I agree. Dakota says, happy Tuesday, Boyd. Hello, Boyd Lake. Hello.
SEO King of America.
Jimmy Otts in the Big Ten SEC money train is leaving the station. Florida State needs to be on it. I think it's such a dangerous time for Florida State.
Yeah, do you understand how precarious of a situation that is?
Man.
You leave your conference, and now all of a sudden, you're in a position where you need the SEC or the Big Ten. They don't need you. You need them. That's a problem.
It's wild. Ken Williams. The way everything looks, it's going to be all super conferences. ACC is very weak in football. That reminds me of the Suck 12 situations. Well, and they were able to flip that script where you no longer were, and I don't know how the ACC does this now. I think the way that realignment, contraction, expansion worked, I think isn't this exactly why you went with Calford? Isn't this why? I don't know. Was that a desperation move? It kind of feels like it was. And I understand it now.
I think at the time you were trying to fortify your conference. You were like, hey, Florida State's being a pain in the ass. there were rumors. I remember there were rumors swirling around about Florida State, Clemson, Miami, and possibly a UNC or a Duke kind of teaming up to leave your conference and, burn it to the ground.
But do you guys, if we revised history, what if Carol Folt and USC had not betrayed the Pac-12 and the Pac-12 had added Big 12 schools?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it's a very different looking landscape.
Can you even imagine that?
And frankly, I think if you think about that type of scenario, I don't think because Brett Yormark at that point wouldn't be involved in any of this.
No,
and I'm not saying
I don't think we'd have a Big 12.
Well, but my point is I'm not saying Brett Yormark is solely responsible for the idea of a God tier. Obviously, that's been discussed for a decade now. But the point is that if the Big 12 was the one getting burned to the ground, I think this conversation would look very different because people didn't like working with George Kliavkoff for the Pac-12.
Well, I think the God tier is only able to come to fruition now, and I agree with you. It's been talked about for at least a decade. I think it's only able to come to fruition now because the playing field has been very clearly laid out, and the hierarchy of cash and power in college football has been very clearly laid out.
Mm-hmm.
It is very, very crystal clear that you have the money that resides in the Big Ten. And I think the SEC likes to get out over its skis a little bit and bloviate about how strong this conference is. You're not financially on the same playing field as the Big Ten is.
But it's like the Pac-12, the Conference of Champions. We're the best. We're amazing. They want to tell you that their sneakers should cost $1,000, but it's a $5
They won the badminton
bro.
national champ. They're the Conference of Champions.
Hey, you start talking shit.
They won.
Come on.
Listen, they won the underwater golf championship.
I get it, dude. You drove it 2 yards underwater, and that was great.
I mean, that 4-inch putt into the recirculator at the bottom of the pool was the stuff of nobody ever saw it. And I just think you look at the SEC. Is it the best football league in the country?
Yeah, bar none.
Yes. Is the Big Ten the second best football league in the country? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. That's the Big 12. And the difference is that, to your point, Greg Skanky has told everybody how great the SEC is. The Big Ten just pulls out its wallet.
Yeah.
And the Big 12 is just going to go about, I think right now, very quietly, trying to make itself stronger and stronger every single day.
Mm-hmm.
And basketball is how they're going to do that. And I don't buy into the financial dominance of the SEC. Your TV deal is not financially dominant. It is the second best deal.
It's reliable, but it's not. A lot of people like to paint the SEC in this sort of hey, it's the SEC and everyone else in every facet of athletics and in college athletics, and I don't think that's necessarily the case. But I do think it is the case that they've dominated the college football playoff to a point where they're going to be getting paid money for a long time off of that success on the football field. And if you're the Big 12, and I saw the comments on our channel, where I said, hey, the Big 12 hasn't done a great job in the college football playoff. I understand TCU was there 1 year. I get it. I understand.
Yeah, TCU fan was looking for you.
Yeah,
Oklahoma fan is looking for you.
Listen, one-hit wonder school in TCU. I get it, dude. You guys have a quality football program. You're not a regular in the college football playoff.
But being a quality football program isn't good enough anymore.
It's not.
And I think a lot of people don't recognize this. This is the Michigan conversation.
Yes.
Michigan, hey, congratulations. Congratulations. You won sort of a national championship. But if Michigan backslides the way that most people believe they're going to backslide, and if Michigan is just an also-ran, how much more damage does that do to the Big Ten? And I think it's significant.
We're out here celebrating that Michigan has 18 invites to the combine. The most in since 2003, I think it is, for a single team. You think those 18 invites aren't going to have an impact on you this season?
I think the Big Ten is a marketing piece. That's what the Big Ten is. We can sit here and we can spin it any way you want to spin it. I don't think there's any question that right now today that the Oregon, Ohio State dominance is about to begin in that league. And I think it's significant that Oregon is coming into the biggest and the best, and they're going to compete for a league title this year.
Keep it real.
And I think it speaks to the level of just absolute garbage that the Big Ten has been in football and basketball for the last 7-8 years. Ohio State, and I am not an Ohio State fan, so Michigan fan.
Monty, you're drinking the right Kool-Aid. Come on.
Put your knives away. Ohio State has been the only consistent performer in that league year in and year out. And until Jim Harbaugh's proven not to be a cheater, I think that you can't look at his performance before the sign stealer guy thing and be like, oh no, they were just better on the field. Well, they may have been better on the field, but now we have to ask how and why. The only consistent performer in that league has been Ohio State, who's been there just about every year.
Mm-hmm.
That has been a 2.5 team league. And I know we're going to call it, Pedo State Field. I get it. Penn State has sort of been there, but is James Franklin really a threat to anybody's football dominance? No, he's not. The Big Ten is a joke in football. The Big Ten is a joke in basketball until they're not. Because when you add USC, Oregon, Washington, I think when you start adding these power programs, and I don't include UCLA in that, when you start those are 3 pretty good athletic departments. So now maybe this league gets a little deeper. The SEC's already deeper. The SEC's already a strong basketball league. The SEC's already a dominant football conference. So let's stop trying to pretend like you're anything more than a rich guy with a 25-year-old hot blonde and you're like 75 and 500 pounds.
Yeah.
Because that's what the Big Ten is right now. I honest to God, I'm tired of hearing from, like, there was an Indiana fan in the comments section over the weekend talking about how Indiana's got heritage. Nobody cares about your heritage, guy. It's Gen Z and millennials. They don't know about Bobby Knight. They don't know, dude, get over it. They don't know anything that happened before, again, they banged into their mom's thighs on the way into the world.
Look here, man.
Nothing happened before that. The Big Ten's irrelevant in 9 out of 10 of these conversations.
Yeah.
And what brings them back to the table? They got that scratch.
Yes.
That's it. The Big Ten is not as viable athletically as the Big 12. The football programs and the basketball programs in the Big 12 are outperforming most of the league in the Big Ten.
Yeah. I mean, I think the best way I've always said is, in the Big 12, you've got, 70-80% participation rate out of your member institutions in both sports. Whereas in the Big Ten, you've got like 10% with 2 teams and everyone else just kind of sucks.
Yep. George Hare says, good morning. Hope Monty had a great birthday. Thank you. Thank you. The new graphics look great.
Yeah. Any comment on the fact that there's not like 50 Normans on the wall, dude? Like, we changed.
How do you hyenas miss that?
Like, come on, dude. We went out of our way, like, huge pain in the ass, had the guy come back like 3 times. Like, come on, dude.
Find the Norman,
bro.
Find the Norman. We got Raleigh, we got Clemson,
and it's on there. We know exactly where it is.
I know exactly where the Norman is.
Find it.
Yeah. So good luck with that. Hello, Stillwater. How about Stillwater? Stillwater. Oh, Oak State James, Stillwater. Anyway, all of this because they didn't go into the college football playoff when one sport is making them money and it can't be covered for multiple years. No, I don't think that this was about this past college football playoff in its entirety. I think that was probably the final straw.
Yeah, I think that put gasoline on a fire that was already raging.
Yeah, honestly. Florida State is perpetually unhappy.
Yeah.
Florida State is the try hard.
Florida State's little brother, dude. Florida State is, oh man, we're going to try and sell you that we're Georgia and Alabama, and we're very clearly not. And I don't care how many, quote, opt-outs they had in the bowl game, dude. Like, at some point, you have to prove that you're good enough to beat an SEC team, and you've not done that. Dakota Tubbs. Hello, Dakota. Hello. The truth is, no one really wants to deal with Florida State. Florida State acts like Texas without bringing the same value, and it's toxic. Totally agree. Florida State has proven time and time again to be a toxic entity. Yeah, again, and it's this concept of if you win, you can be a pain in the ass. Like, it's not hard to understand.
And I just wonder, in 5 years when all this is shook out, people will still remember this. But if we're 10, 15, 20, 30, 40, 50 years down the road, and Florida State ends up in probably the Big 12 or the SEC, does anybody really care?
No.
Nobody cares.